Hey, everybody. Got lots of people on today. I'm looking through participants and I see what is this? Oh, it's funny. I wonder who that is. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll give it a couple more minutes, maybe just one, and then I'll go ahead and get started because I want to make sure I'm not taking advantage of anybody's time. But thank you for all coming today. I appreciate it. Good to see some familiar faces too. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good to see you guys. Good to see you, Jake. All right. Okay, so my name is Kate Sallee. I work with One Team, and I am currently their growth and operations director. I also am an operations coach, and then I began a company about 2.5 years ago now called Leverage Opportunity, which is a transaction management company. This year, we're projected to do about 475, hopefully hitting that 500 transaction count. And so we definitely see our fair share of transactions. And so that is why this is something that is then tried and true and tested. What I'm hoping to do today is not fluff. I'm not talking about things that feel good or sound really good. I'm talking about the tangible things that you can implement today in your real estate transaction. So before we get started, I want to cater this because it is a smaller group. I want to cater this to exactly what you're looking for and who you are. So if you don't mind, in the chat, and Abby's going to help me out just a little bit here, but in the chat, go ahead and type out whether you are a solo agent, if you are a rainmaker, if you are a transaction manager, operations, if you're a team agent. That way I can see that kind of data and I'll be able to pinpoint exactly what we're talking about today to make sure that it applies to you. So if you don't mind, go ahead and drop that in there. And I'll try to open that up actually here. Okay, so we've got a little bit of everything so far, but a lot of solos and some operations staff, so that's great. Perfect. Okay, good. I love this mix. Also, shout out to all my operations people because we don't have a lot of stuff that's necessarily geared towards them. And I love it when we have something that speaks directly to you. So I'm going to try to talk to you guys as much as possible. Make sure you feel the love here too. Okay, and then as we go through, I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask questions whenever you have them. And Abby's going to be monitoring that chat. So Abby, if you don't mind, just shout at me if somebody has a question and I don't necessarily see the chat. Because I want to answer your questions in real time, but I'm also going to have the opportunity for questions at the very end. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to break this up into sections. The first section is just general strategies that you can implement into your typical transaction plan. I recognize that there might be some of you who have been in the business a long time and are looking to add value. We're going to make sure that we meet your needs there, but also for some of our solo agents who may be newer, who are kind of maybe flying by the seat of your pants and you're like, well, I'm learning every transaction. I'm learning something new. That's great. But what I want to do is jump ahead and make sure that you're leveling up to compete with the market and the other agents that are here. And then when it comes to our transaction managers and ops folks, my goal is that you're going to have the opportunity to share what's working for you at the end of this also, but hopefully you get some things that are giving you a leg up too, that you can take back to your rainmaker and make some of those processes easier on yourself, but also adding value to the agents that you serve. Okay, so that's our general strategies. Then we're going to talk about some technology that either I currently use in my own company, but also I've coached people to use, and some of my faves there, and things that can enhance some of the efficiency in your business or in the transaction management process. And then we're going to talk about leveraging. This will be great for a lot of you solo agents. When do you need to lean on somebody else? And then how do you get to that stage? And then we'll have room for questions here at the end. Okay, so we're in that strategic tips part. I'm going to run through these again. If you have any questions, just write them down in the chat and Abby will scream at me or something. The first one is kind of a given, setting early expectations. But this is one that I notice right away when I'm doing a transaction. I can tell whether or not the realtor has sat down with their clients post home shopping process, right? Like you go through the showing period and they know what that looks like. And then it's a rush into contract and they're not exactly sure what to expect, which makes it kind of rocky. And they panic because they're like, here I have been spending the last 2 months with you and we haven't gotten to this stage yet. They haven't even thought about it, the rush of emotions. If they're working with a loan officer, now they've got them breathing down their back for loan application. It's really important that you're clearly communicating what's about to happen when you're writing that purchase contract. And it may have been 2 months ago when you wrote the first one for them, but making sure that they're refreshed and they know what to expect. So clearly communicate things like the timelines of the purchase contract and the milestones and expectations even before you write it is really important. The other thing, and we kind of learn this from a customer service standpoint, is making sure that you discuss the potential challenges. One thing that I think is kind of dangerous for a buyer, especially first-time home buyers, to go into is thinking that it's all daisies, right? Like they don't know what the big hurdles are, and that's going to help them later on. So making sure that you're incorporating that into your verbiage is really important. And then lastly, just emphasizing again, transparent communication. How do you like to be communicated with? How do they like to be communicated with? And what does that relationship look like? These are all really important to have before you even go into contract in the first place. The next one is the checklist. And if any of you know me, you know, like obviously this one's going to be on there because I love a good checklist. But we're going to talk about what a typical checklist might look like and then what an enhanced checklist might look like. Because I'm going to push you a little bit, especially transaction managers, on making sure that your checklist is saving the day when you're not fully there. And for realtors that are on vacation, you're sitting at the pool and you're trying to do stuff and you want something that when your brain is not fully activated, you're in a showing, you're in the car and you're trying to get something done when you're not your full 110% self. You want to have a checklist that you can lean on. And I'm going to show you the difference between a good checklist and a great checklist. But you want something that when you're looking at it, all you have to do is read through it and you can activate the creative side of your brain, which allows you to put cherries on top of stuff, which allows you to maximize the customer service experience. And so spending time now building a checklist that's going to help you when you're at your 80% or your 60% or your 40% is going to save the day. It also promotes scalability, right? Like you're not going to be able to ever truly leave your business in the hands of somebody else, whether it be for a quick vacation or to grow, if you don't have your brain written down. And so checklists are really, really important. In fact, I would go as far to say that you don't necessarily have a viable business if you don't have checklists and operations written down. And one of the best pieces of advice that somebody ever gave me was to build a business that somebody would buy. And if that is my goal, then I have to have my brain written down. Otherwise, it's no good to anybody but myself. And what I'm doing is I'm digging myself a bigger hole, right? Like it's big enough for me and it's deep enough for me, but I'm not able to bring anybody in and I'm not able to get out of this. And so that's why checklists are so important. And then of course, it offers you the ability to do more. When we really optimized our checklist, we went from 12 is making me panic to 24 is pretty comfortable for me. And so if you are on a growth path, or if you're a transaction manager feeling like, why is this stressing me out? I don't understand. Other people are doing twice as much as me, but I feel stressed. Take a look at your checklist. Okay, so here's an example of a simple checklist item. So I'm just going to use something generic. The checklist item is loan application. And what that means is that you can confirm that the buyer has made formal loan application. This seems fair, right? Like that's a checklist. I did it. We confirmed that the buyer has made formal loan application. But anybody that has ever been in real estate knows that there's like 8 different things that go with that one checklist item. So if I enhance it a little bit in my checklist, I go from what I would call a milestone item which is loan application. That's a milestone. And then I'm going to break it down into smaller tasks. For example, I connect with the lender regarding the loan application, because we all know they don't necessarily just give it to you. You have to reach out for them. So we're reaching out to the loan officer. And then I even have a tab that tells me which verbiage I use to send that, because I've already, I mean, how many times every single transaction, you're probably asking. So you save that verbiage, and then it's a copy paste game. So that's my first task. And then I have received permission to notify the co-op by the buyer. So I have to make sure that I get permission to send that they've formally applied for their loan. That's another verbiage. And then I can notify the co-op of formal loan application. And there's probably 3 other different tasks you could fit in there depending on how you want your checklist built. The purpose behind me saying this is that anytime you take a task, it can feel overwhelming unless you break it into smaller little chips. So it's a big boulder, loan application is a milestone. Let's break it into smaller subsections so that I can pass it off if I need to. If I pass this off to somebody that didn't know anything, they would have no clue what to do, but they'd have a lot better, I guess if I gave them a checklist like this, because this is how I actually do it. And this is how I actually want it done. So we've got scalability. And then we've also got, if somebody's not at their 100% and they're just, I mean, they're on the run, they're doing showings, or maybe you're a TC and you've got 3 new transactions you've got to process. You don't want to have to think that deeply, right? Just check it off, check it off the list, and it makes it a lot more manageable. The next one is time blocking for the extraction process. When I say extraction process, that's right when you go into contract. And for transaction managers, for those of you guys out there, that's when you get notified that you have a new deal, a new transaction to process. And so time blocking a specific time to go through the MLS, to go through the auditor site, to go through the purchase contract, to go through all of those compliance documents, and doing it in 1 hour. I think for people that are just getting started with a good checklist, you could do it in maybe 1 hour and 30, but optimally you'd want it to do it in less than an hour and go through the entire process. The goal is to get caught up with the agent, right? The goal is to go all the way without talking to them, all the way back to the MLS and work your way up so that you're on the same page about this transaction. For realtors, it's about, I mean, you've done all of the legwork to get them this far. The biggest temptation that I see every day is that's when we lean over and we huff and puff. You know what I mean? Like that's when we're like, oh, I did it, you know, or the listing agent checks out. And we've all been in transactions like that where you're like, where'd you go when I needed you? You check out. And so in this case, we need to make sure that we're time blocking the day after you go into contract at some point to get our stuff together. You have to minimize distractions and focus fully on the transaction so that we reduce errors. You are your best self in a transaction on day 1 because everything's fresh. And so if you wait too long and say, I'll organize my documents later, I'll do X, Y, and Z later, I'll send out my initial communications later, I'll do that later, you've now forgotten everything. You really have. And I don't trust that person. I trust my same day person. So you want to make sure that you're time blocking time as early as possible to gather and organize those documents and make sure that you're not rushing around looking for things last minute, things that you should know and have available right in the palm of your hand, whether it be in a Dropbox account or in .loop or DocuSign, whatever that looks like. So we really want to make sure that we're time blocking there. When I talk about the extraction process, this is what I'm talking about. And this is an example of what we have used, but I've used several different things over the years. This is truly a snapshot of everything that we would gather from the MLS, from the auditor site, from the purchase contracts, from additional terms and conditions and addendums and all of that good stuff, all in one snapshot. And so when I say extraction, this is what I'm talking about. It should be really important that you have one place you can go that you can trust. And I trust the person that wrote this because they wrote this and they put it together on day 1. And so I know that they were their best selves. And if they time blocked and minimized distractions, then the information that's here is going to be correct. Because when you're processing more than 4, probably, you're mixing pieces of information. Is that really what it said? I don't know why that says 290. I was feeling like it was 280. But if I trust the person that wrote this, if I trust the me that took the time to time block, then I'm leaning fully in this and I can wipe everything else out of my brain. You know what I mean? I can really trust the information and the data collected, and then make sure that it's updated all the time. But the beautiful thing about something like this is not only do we pour our best selves into it and make sure that the information is accurate, and everybody's might look different depending on what information you want to keep, but this is going to be really great information to pass off to other parties, like your loan officer, like the title company, like your agent, like the co-op, to make sure that we're all on the same, not agent, your client, to make sure that we're all on the same page. And there's nothing on ours that I wouldn't want anybody to see. So you'll notice, like, I minimized my client's personal contact information because I wouldn't want to give that to the co-op. So I make sure that it's customized to fit everybody's needs. And I take one sheet and I send it out to everybody so that we're all on the same page. But that leads me to my next point, is to make sure from the get-go, you are setting the stage for how you want communication to go in this transaction. It's kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a power move. I think that's exactly what I wanted to say. It's kind of like a power move. The sooner you get that information out and you train them how you want to be treated in this transaction, the better. And so with title companies or with loan officers or even with clients, if you get to them first and you can spell out how you want things to move, especially my transaction managers out there, you have to make it clear that you're a part of this transaction and that you want to be included on all communication moving forward. And so if that's not in your initial email, then you need to add it, because otherwise we both know that they're going to be reaching out to the agent. They're going to be bothered because they're like, come on, I have a transaction manager for this, and they're going to have to forward it back to you. So making sure that you're using a power move, which is just initial communication. Give them the entire purchase contract document. I don't care if they already received it from the agent. Go ahead and send it again. This is everything I have, because what you're doing is you're training them and training their mind that you have the information and that you're the go-to for data or anything that they need, not the agent. And so in this case, you're obviously CCing the agent on everything, but we want you to be the main communication source with them. For agents, it's setting the stage with the co-op too, because you certainly wouldn't want to get far along in the contract and there be a miscommunication on dates. For example, I actually have something more personal. So there was a transaction that I was a part of, but I was not the transaction manager on it. I was working with somebody else and really just monitoring everything. And initial communication never went out. It never got sent to anybody. And there was an issue later on about possession date. The agent didn't understand and there was a disagreement. I firmly believe if we had set the stage with the timeline ahead of time, we wouldn't have to deal with that later. We would have had that conversation immediately, which is really, really, really important before you get into inspections and all of that stuff. So we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that there are no questions about some of those core deadlines that we're talking about. We want to focus not on a bunch of fluffy stuff, but on the data. What does the timeline say and what are the expectations for all parties involved? You're not telling people how to do their job, but you are telling them that, hey, I'm monitoring. I'm just watching. I'll be checking in with you. And I want to make sure that this is moving smoothly. You're not insulting anybody. You're just saying we're a team here and I can't wait to work with you. And then encouraging regular communication. It shouldn't be a surprise when they get an email from you asking about title commitment because you told them you would. And so you're just making sure that all parties are really playing as a team. The next one I have is something that I don't see very often. It's ending all communications with next steps, especially for first-time home buyers. This is a really important one. For people, not only from a customer service standpoint as a client, I would want to know what's happening next. What's my role in this? What should I do next? I don't know what to do. I'm twiddling my thumbs here and I feel like I should do something. I don't know what to do. That causes me to be uneasy, which then causes me to be stressed, which then causes me to text you at 11:30 going, how is everything? And so in order to combat that, what we do is every time we communicate with a client, we want to make sure that they know what the next step is. Now, sometimes the next step is not their next step. Sometimes it's my next step. Just want to let you know the next step is for me to reach out to so-and-so and get such and such. Or just want to let you know the next step is make sure that you schedule those inspections, or make sure you reach out and connect with blank or the utility companies, whatever that is. There's always a next step. So this is something that you can be like, well, I don't know what to say. There's always something to say, whether it's their next step or yours. It reduces ambiguity. Like I said, this idea of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's happening. My realtor hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. Am I missing something? People panic like that, especially in a high stress situation. And I don't have to tell you that there have been statistics that say that moving in general is a really, really high stress situation. I think it ranks over divorce. Okay. So like, this is something we know they're stressed about, whether or not they're telling you they are. And so we want to make sure that they always have a next step, whether they do it or not, that's, that's on you and them, but you're communicating that. And another reason why we do that is to make sure that we're always ahead of the deadlines. This idea that you can reach out the day that something is due is not staying ahead of things. You're playing defense at that point. And whether you are a solo agent, you're a rainmaker, or you're an office manager, transaction manager, think of it like a game. You should always be on offense. The idea that you're nagging or that you're bothersome, let it go, unless you really are. Like if you are nagging, I would call you out and be like, all right, you need to chill a little bit. But being ahead of schedule doesn't mean nagging. It's just checking in, making sure that we're moving. And I can guarantee, because of experience, that I would reach out on something and they would say, oh yeah, we got that 3 days ago, or we just got it. I get that one a lot. Oh yeah, I just got that. Let me send that over to you. And I'm like, you didn't just get that. You've been sitting on it for 2 days. But because we're ahead of schedule, not only do we get things quicker, we move through quicker, but because you're ahead of schedule, you're actually reducing issues later. I cannot solve the world's problems as a transaction manager. I can't do that. But what I can do is find out what they are before anybody else, because I'm following up. And so if you have the option to figure out that there's a red flag before anyone else does, that's massive value that you're adding to your client. And that's what you promised you would do, right? If you think of who you were in that initial pitch to get them as a client, that's what you were promising, to have their best interest in mind. So for me, getting ahead of deadlines isn't a luxury. It's something that we promise to people. And so in order to do that, we create reminders for ourselves. Whether it's in your Google Calendar, what I like to call intermediate milestones. The milestone is, let's say it is scheduling the closing, but the intermediate milestone is reaching out a week ahead of that to blah, 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 blah. And so these are intermediate milestones that we have a deadline, we have timelines, but we're going to create new deadlines for ourselves to make sure that we stay ahead of the game, and it's always on offense. And I firmly believe that this is a way to avoid that last minute rush, especially with loan officers, and sometimes even when it comes to scheduling closing. My next point for strategic tips is incorporating vendor relationships. This is a big one from a financial standpoint, and we could talk about that all day, but in reality, it makes the transaction smoother if you're working with people that are for you and for your business. And so finding a way to incorporate their name and their referral into your typical transaction is a big win for everybody involved, because you trust them already. Otherwise, they shouldn't be on your referral list. But also you're enhancing the experience for the client, and hopefully you're getting future referrals later on. And so if anybody, this is more of a side note, but if anybody needs assistance with something like this, we've got sponsorship guides and tons of materials that I can share with you to help build that vendor referral network for you. The next one to me is a no-brainer, but it isn't to everybody else and to some people. And so I wanted to mention it too. It's leaning on canned templates. There is few things in a transaction that you or somebody else has never said before. We repeat ourselves all the time. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that, but you are repeating. The purchase contract is the same, right? And so there are deadlines that are the same. And so making sure that you are saving those templates and those email verbiages, those text verbiages, anything that you're doing, even scripting when it comes to phone calls, making sure you're saving that for easy access later. You can cut down a transaction by a solid maybe 4 hours, just maybe closer to 5 or 6 just by writing down some of the typical things you say every time. So and doing it in a way that's authentic, right? You don't have to sound like a robot just because you're copying and pasting. You can do it and still be you. Copy and paste what you've said. And then what I do is for anything that might be a little bit like, oh, that changes every time, make it red, right? Make it a different color. And so as you're copying and pasting, your eye goes to the different color and you go, oh, I have to change that word. Oh, that doesn't apply. They don't have earnest money this time. So I'm going to erase that. And what you're doing is you're just making a system. You're making it efficient for you to continue moving forward. It saves time. It ensures consistency. You're never going to miss anything big that you wanted to share because it's always going to be in those really informative emails. Also, you're limiting communication in that you don't have to be like, oh yeah, and I forgot. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention. Oh yeah. So what you're doing is you're making your email worth reading because people are starting to learn that when you say something, it has value in it. And so your emails look more attractive than they did before because it's packed with value. And then you're reducing errors. That's a big one, especially in the lead game when you're trying to get somebody. If I'm asking you to sell my house, then I'm judging how you spell. I am. Like, I hate to say it and I hate to be that judgmental, but I certainly am. Same thing with your social media. This is kind of a side note, but if your social media isn't up to par, then I'm not going to trust you to market my home. You know what I mean? Like, you can't market yourself. So it's the same thing with writing. If you can't be professional in an email, because I know you're on the road and that's okay. Like, I can't expect everybody to sit at a computer all day, but if you have an email template, that's a really quick send pulled over on the side of the road that takes 2 minutes rather than trying to do it when you're on the run. And then customizing emails with the important information that you can then put the cherry on top. Remember how I said your brain is only like one or the other? You're either that high functioning organized or you're the creative. Your brain has to switch from one to the other. If you've got a copy and paste game going, then use the creative side of your brain to be like, oh, I'm going to talk about their dog. Oh yeah, I need to follow up on how their daughter's feeling. Those kinds of things are the cherry on top that other people miss because they're so focused on the vital information. The vital information is typically repeatable. So save it in a Dropbox folder, save it in email templates, whatever that looks like. The next one is my personal favorite and one that I wish people did more. I'm a big fan of the humble brag. I'm not talking about pride. I'm talking about a humble brag, and I have reasons to back me up on this one. When you are doing a humble brag, the idea is that it's authentic in a way that you've been running around trying to save this transaction, and you do it every time. I know how hard you guys work, whether you're a transaction manager or a realtor, but I can guarantee that the majority of stuff that you do never is seen, never is spoken of, your client doesn't know. This is the worst case scenario, in my opinion, that a client that you worked with walks away from the closing table saying, that was easier than I thought it would be. That's worst case scenario, in my opinion. That's worst case scenario. Best case scenario is they said, oh, I am so glad that I worked with such and such because I don't know if I could have done that on my own. That's best case scenario. And they will not be able to say that unless you tell them what you've done for them. So this idea of what we've done, like we just assume they know how hard we're working, or we tell them the last step. Right? We tell them, yeah, I got everything scheduled. Your POA is in place. Everything's good. We tell them that, but we don't tell them how many people or how long it took to get to that endpoint, right? We don't tell them the steps and the hoops that we had to jump through to get to the end result. And when you skip over that, I thought at one point, I was like, oh, I don't want to burden them with that. They just want to know. They just want to know that everything's good. Well, sure they do, but you have to add a little bit to the plate to say this was not easy and you could not have done this yourself, right? Because if you want referrals, the best referral you're going to get is Kate saved the day. She saved my butt and I couldn't have done this without her. That's an emotional connection. You know, it isn't an emotional connection. I don't really know how it happened, but it happened. That's not winning in this case, and it's certainly not winning referrals. So what you do is you find ways to just bring it up in conversation. Instead of saying, I did this for you, yeah, I had to da, 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 and then I did this, and then we ended up getting this. And so you almost brag a little bit on the process that it took to get to Z. And doing that authentically and sharing the story of who you had to run through, maybe even throwing in, yeah, it was a little stressful, but we made it. That's more valuable than we made it, right? At least to them, because they don't understand everything you went through to get to that place. Does that make sense in terms of the humble brag? Okay, awesome. The next one is making time for going the extra mile. And I know that we're all strapped for time, and it's like, how could I possibly put something else onto my schedule? If you systematize it and if you make it the standard, I can promise you that it becomes part of the transaction the same way that anything else would. And we can talk all day about different strategies and different things you can do, but really it's 3 steps here. The first one, ask yourself, what are the big milestones in a transaction? And you can do this before the transaction, during the lead generation process, during the showing process, during the listing of the home. What are the big milestones that we hit? What are the big ones? And then ask yourself, what am I doing during those big milestones, and how am I doing it? For example, possession date. That's a big milestone. That's a big one. That's the day that they get their keys. What are you doing that's unique or special on that day? And can you systematize it? DoorDash is a beautiful thing, right? And so if you're not incorporating things like that, things like bringing and taking moving boxes on your listing appointment, if you're not doing things that are really simple and you're already doing it, just take something else and building it into your checklist and into the standard for you, then you will not be able to set yourself apart, and you lose an opportunity to make an emotional connection, which is what this whole thing is built on. How do I connect with them so that I can easily connect with the person that they refer me to? And so you really just want to look for things that are unique and special. What would you like done? What has made a difference to you when you go to a hotel? What have they done for you in terms of great customer service? And then replicate and make it something that isn't necessarily extravagant, but it's thoughtful and personalized. Okay, so we're switching gears a little bit here into some technology that I wanted to share with you guys. And I won't sit on this long, but I'm happy to answer some questions if you have any. We've all talked about our database for the last 3 years. That's been the main conversation, and that's why Command was created. But I firmly believe you're as good as your database is. And so when it comes to automating communication and giving yourself a leg up when it comes to the transaction, then I firmly believe that a CRM is really, really important. At Keller Williams, we have Command, right? Like that is a system that we use for my company. And it's been very, very insightful, but Command is only as good as you let it be, and you have to put in the data to make it that way. Follow Up Boss is another great database. Sync and Brivity are ones that I've trained on. And I actually used to use Follow Up Boss at one point, but these are all really, really great CRMs. Command is what we're currently using. Project management platforms. I have done everything. I've done printing out papers. I've done the manila folder. I've done the binder route. And right now for us, we're using TC Docs, which is a really great platform that helps us to do as many transactions as we are doing. And it helps us automate emails. It collects and saves a lot of data. We get to keep all of our checklists in there and all of our email verbiage and transaction verbiage. But there are other great systems. I highly recommend, if you're doing enough deals to keep you busy, then I think you should be using a project management platform, especially if you're looking to grow and you want somewhere to save your checklist. But I say that in a way that you don't have to. You don't have to. You could create your checklist in an Excel spreadsheet. That's absolutely fine. You could print them out each time, or you could do it all digitally. You can save your checklist in .loop even if you wanted to. It's really about figuring out what is giving you the best leg up and the most efficiency. For us, it's TC Docs. And that is a paid program. Trello, Asana, Monday, and Folio, those are all good ones. And then Google Calendar is another way that you can add your deadlines and tasks in that doesn't actually cost you anything. Business data tracking isn't really transaction related, but I will say that it's helpful when keep all of your information and to do that in the initial extraction process, because you want to make sure that your P&L is up to date. And as an entrepreneur, you're just being a good steward of your money. We keep all of ours in Google Sheets. I don't pay a dime for my business tracking data. I've used things like the CTE, which are great for bigger teams, but you can recreate the CTE in an Excel spreadsheet. It's really just about having your information ready to go and making sure that your finances are in order. And then lastly, I just wanted to add a couple additional tools that we use, or things that I would highly recommend having if you're looking to get that leg up and enhance that transaction experience. For us, I think Zoom, obviously, and FaceTime. When clients, I imagine, they're watching the home reno shows and they're seeing how realtors are interacting with their clients. Zoom is a part of that. And this idea that we have to always have face-to-face is just not true, but sometimes it's better than a phone call. So Zoom is important. Dual screens is a non-negotiable for me, especially when you're doing the extraction process. It probably speeds us up, and we're 3 times, maybe 4 times as fast with dual screens. They also, instead of having like dual monitors, they now have, like on Amazon and wherever you go, like these slips that come over the laptop and it pops out screens. So it's travel, you know? And so dual screens is a big one for us. Screen recorder like Loom, I have it built into my computer. And so that's really great when you're working with clients or you want to send something. Google Workspace or Drive is massive. We use it every single day and store pretty much all of our templates, everything in there for our business. Email templates within Gmail. You can save, if you write an email, you can save that template in a folder in Gmail. And so every time you need it, you just click the button and it pulls up all of your templates. So if you're not wanting to go as extreme as we have gone with our hundreds and hundreds of templates, the ones that you send all the time, just save them in email. Like that'll make it really easy for you to move forward. And then Remarkable Tablet is a great note-taking tool that then converts and goes directly into your computer. But it's like a little tablet that then moves directly onto like your Drive or wherever you want it saved. The last piece, when do you need to leverage some stuff off? When do you, and leverage not by necessarily hiring. And as for my transaction managers, not necessarily by getting a transaction assistant. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when do you need to leverage systems, people, platforms, anything like that. When do I need to lean on something else? I feel like people, they get so caught up in the, I have to hit this mark before I can do something. And sometimes it's more emotional than that. And so that I wanted to touch on this specifically. So when do you need to leverage? When you have a consistent feeling that something is about to drop. We have all been there, whether it be work related or at home. And it feels like, I always talk about the grocery bag analogy, when you're like, okay, I'm going to do this in one trip because I'm macho woman. And so I'm going to use my hands and I'm going to use my arms and like my neck and stuff. And I'm trying to get to where I'm going. And sure enough, because I am persistent, I manage to hold all of my bags. But the second I get into the kitchen, I have no idea how to let them go. I have no idea, because I'm afraid if I move one finger, I don't know what's going to fall because I have no idea what's wrapped around it. That is a real feeling I think I felt in business, but also in personal life, where you're like, I need help with some of these bags. And I don't know which ones yet, but I need somebody to come in and help me with that. So that's a sign you need to leverage. Somebody is being neglected, whether it be your leads and you can't keep up with them, your clients are not getting what they were promised by you, or your family, or even yourself. You find yourself doing tasks you dread or are overpaid for. This is kind of an iffy one because finances matter in all of these situations. But if you hate what you're doing when it comes to transaction management, or maybe it's the lead follow-up, or maybe it's cutting your grass, I don't know. But when you hate it and you feel like I am overpaid for this, that is a sign that you probably need to leverage something off your plate. Fourth is the most powerful and scariest one to me. Kind of makes me shiver when I think about it, because I've run into agents and I've run into people that when you talk about growing their business, they're terrified. I totally understand not wanting to grow because you're comfortable where you are. That's your business and you can do it however you like. But if you're terrified of growth because you're sinking, that's sad. That's so sad. I wouldn't want that for anybody, because those people typically can grow. But they feel like they can't. And so it's scary to them to see the success that they could have. And so if that is how it feels, then you definitely should be leveraging. And then the last one, you're ready to get ahead of a shifting market. If you really want to leg up, I firmly believe in the power of leverage. And that's something that we offer at One Team and a leverage opportunity, but it's also something that can be found even in your family dynamic, but also at the brokerage level itself, in the market center, and then in your colleagues and the people around you, especially if you're growing a team. Okay, sorry, I feel like I didn't take a breath during that whole time, but I want to ask, does anybody have any transaction specific questions, or maybe something about some of the tech or anything that we've talked about today? I want to give you the opportunity to reach out. Feel free to write it in the chat too if you're uncomfortable shouting it out. Okay, well, if anybody has any questions, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and give Abby my PowerPoint too. So if anybody wants that, go ahead and drop that in the chat too, and she can send that out. And then she also left a note, thank you, Abby, about the recording. It'll be on YouTube. It probably is already on its way there because she's so speedy. But if anybody has any questions, please reach out. I'll put my email in the chat if anybody has anything. I'm happy to share some verbiages or some tips. I can take a look at checklists, whatever you like, because I know we're all here to help each other out. I'll give you my LevOp email. And if anybody has any questions, just reach out, okay? All right, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time.